When an elderly black woman is pulled over by a racist cop who thinks he's about to teach her a lesson, he has no idea he's about to face the wrath of a woman who holds the power to change history. Little does he know, this woman is not just anyone, she's a Supreme Court justice. The sun was just beginning to set, casting an orange glow over the quiet street where Margaret Robinson was driving. At 72 years old, she had seen more than her fair share of injustice, but today, something about the way the officer's patrol car appeared behind her felt different. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel, but she maintained a calm exterior as she always did, even when faced with the worst of humanity. As the cop car's lights flashed in the rearview mirror, Margaret sighed. She had been here before, too many times before, but she had never once allowed fear to overtake her. Years of fighting for justice had made her accustomed to the feeling of being watched, being judged, and being underestimated. She was used to it, but today, this officer would not have the satisfaction of getting away with it. She pulled over to the side of the road, her mind racing. She knew the drill. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, be respectful, and hope for the best. She had been trained for moments like this, not just by her career in law, but by her lived experience. The officer stepped out of his patrol car with a swagger, his hand resting on his holster as he approached her vehicle. He was young, probably no older than 25, and his uniform was stiff with the pride of a rookie cop. He didn't notice Margaret's sharp eyes as she sized him up in the mirror. "Good evening, ma'am. You were speeding back there. License and registration, please," he said, his tone almost mockingly polite. Margaret didn't immediately respond. Instead, she took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. She knew this was no ordinary traffic stop. She had been in the courtroom, in the heat of battle, defending the law, and standing up for the very rights this young officer thought he could strip away. But today, the battlefield was different. It was a street, and she would fight here too. "Is there a reason you pulled me over?" Margaret asked, her voice steady and calm, despite the tension bubbling just beneath the surface. The officer raised an eyebrow, clearly annoyed by her question. "You were speeding, ma'am," he said. "I'll need your license and registration." Margaret nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. As she reached for her purse, she was fully aware that the officer had already decided she was guilty before he even stopped her. He hadn't looked at her with the eyes of a law-abiding citizen. He had looked at her with the eyes of a person who saw her only for the color of her skin. And that angered her more than anything. "Do you know who I am?" Margaret asked, her voice still calm but now carrying an edge. She could see the officer's confusion, his irritation slowly shifting to defensiveness. "What?" He blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I am Justice Margaret Robinson," she said, the words coming out slow and deliberate, as if emphasizing every syllable. "I serve on the Supreme Court of this nation. You've just pulled over one of the highest authorities in this country. Now, do you still want my license and registration, or do you want to apologize for your mistake?" For a moment, the officer stood frozen, his mouth slightly agape. He hadn't expected this. He had expected an elderly black woman who would cower under his authority, just like the many others he had bullied on these streets. But Margaret had shown him the most dangerous thing a racist cop could face, the power of a woman who knew exactly who she was. The officer fumbled for his words, trying to find a response that could cover the embarrassment creeping up his neck. But before he could speak, Margaret interrupted him. "Let me be clear," she continued, her voice now taking on the calm authority of someone who had spent decades in the courts. "You do not get to treat people like this, and you do not get to decide who is worthy of respect based on the color of their skin. I've spent my life ensuring that justice is blind, and today you will learn that lesson." The officer stammered, but he knew he had no leg to stand on. He had misjudged the situation entirely. In his mind, he had already pegged her as just another target for his abuse of power, not realizing that Margaret Robinson was one of the last people on this planet who would let him get away with it. Margaret looked at him for a moment longer, then calmly reached for her documents and handed them to him. "You may go now," she said, her eyes cold but composed. And I suggest you reconsider how you treat the next person you pull over. Because if you ever make this mistake again, I will make sure you never wear that badge again. The officer, his face a mixture of humiliation and fear, nodded silently and retreated to his patrol car. Margaret watched him drive away, the weight of the moment settling over her like a storm cloud. This time it was over, but she knew that this small victory was only the beginning. She had made her point, and she wouldn't let anyone forget it. As she drove away, she couldn't help but smile a little. She had been underestimated for far too long. But she wasn't just any elderly woman. She was a Supreme Court justice, and today, she had just shown the world why. For more powerful stories like this, subscribe to Expect Stories and never miss an impactful tale.